So the regular meeting of the Capital Long Range Improvements Committee Transportation Task Force will now begin.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bernstein. I am the chair of the Capital Long Range Improvements Committee Transportation Task Force. Before we begin, I'd like to note this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so that we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Steve Brandt. Steve Brandt. Sonia DeGarmo.
Here.
Scott Engel. Scott Engel. Amity Foster.
Here.
Hi Goodmanstead.
Here.
Risa Hustad.
Here.
Matt Kazinka.
Here.
Erica Mauter.
Here.
Dan Miller.
Here.
George Montague.
Here.
Todd Schumann.
Here.
Jeff Strand.
Here.
Vice Chair Katie Jones. I see that she said she was here. Chair John Bernstein.
Here.
So with that, there's 12 members and a quorum is established.
Thank you. With that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolis.mn.gov. All right, so let's dive in. Our agenda is quite simple. We're going to deal with comments. Before I get to that, as always, first of all, I'd ask that you raise your hand so we can keep order going here. But if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask or any concerns they'd like to share, let's do that now. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, this isn't really a question, but I just wanted to let you all know I able to participate in last week's thing, or the second half of the. I haven't reviewed the second half of the materials because I had a family emergency that sort of just took up the last week and a half. So I'm going to be playing catch up, and I'll probably be abstaining from things if I don't feel like I'm caught up yet on the particular discussion at hand. So just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, thanks for the update and no worries. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, Task Force Chair, noting that I've heard from others and I myself have experienced some technical difficulties with the SharePoint access and or links, etc., that I am suggesting that we have a system as we've used in past years where members send their comments to the task force chair and that we have a secretary appointed and that we try to emulate that process used in past years that worked very effectively so that we can accurately get comments. And also I'm going to suggest that because of those issues, I know that people want to jump right in and approve a whole bunch of things today, but ideally, as the task force chair said during our group session, walking through the past year's click report and identifying where there are gaps that need to be addressed this year is also a very useful tool and a good use of time, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe you got on after I mentioned that, Jeff, but I already said that that's the way we're going to proceed today. Neil, do you have a copy handy that you can share of the comments that were in the file? If not, I can email it to you right now.
So I just have open what's in there right now. So if it's other than that, I think you can just email it to me and I can put it on the screen.
If you have what's in there now, that's fine. Not yet, but at the appropriate time, can you just share your screen with that?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. Let me get back to the participants. Jeff, did you have something else, or do I need to lower your hand? Anybody else with questions or comments before we get started? Okay, so what we're going to do today, Neil, you can go ahead and share that screen. We have a few comments in there. Just so people know, they sort of fall into, well, they fall into three categories, right? Transportation comments, HD comments, and general comments that are not specific to a project that falls under one. They're comments that are broader than a specific task force or project. As you all hopefully know by now, we're not going to consider HD comments. You all have every right to write HD comments and submit them, but those should go into the HD folder. Can you put this, is there a way to put this up one page at a time so it's a little bigger, Neil? So there's been some confusion with this thing, and there's some HD comments that are in here which we'll skip over. There's also a general comment, and there's whoever wrote it didn't write their name next to it. So did anybody who's on the call today author this general comment?
John, I put my hand up to answer. I don't know if you want me to go through that formality, but I put up all the comments that are HD and general, just assuming that we would skip over those, and they're also in the HD folder.
Yeah, okay, so for the future, don't put HD comments in the transportation folder. So general, we will consider, because the way that works is if you are on this committee and you author a general comment, we'll consider it, and if it passes, push it through to the full committee. So our process for today will be, we'll consider, since ideally what we would do is have all reviewed these in advance and be able to move quickly. I'm sure that's not the case since this stuff has been hard to access. So the way I plan to go forward with this is I'll give everybody time to read these comments on the screen before we'll discuss them, and we'll just take them one at a time and consider them. So we'll start with this general comment, which I now understand was authored by Steve. So just take a minute to read it, and then we'll get started. Hey, Dan, could you mute yourself? There's some feedback coming through, I think, from your line. Thank you. Okay, so if you've all had time to read that comment, Sonia, go ahead.
So I was thinking about this over the weekend, and we, as a task force, are given the entirety of all of the CBRs for the Transportation Task Force. And it's a lot to go through, as we've all realized, especially the newcomers. My suggestion, and I don't know if this is feasible, would be to break down the task force into subgroups that would be assigned a manageable number of CBRs to review in more depth, and then use these task force meetings to summarize and present comments to the group that the group would then agree upon or discuss. Is that something that is worth looking into? Maybe not this year, but in the future.
I mean, we're always open to considering different ways to do the process for the future. I think it's too late this year to consider something like that. And I think the best way to proceed with something like that would be to, at the end of our process each year, we have discussions about whether or not we want to consider any changes to the way we do things, and often subcommittees are formed to consider those things and recommend changes to the group. Once we get through this intense session or intense period of time between March and June where we're trying to get the actual work done. George and then Katie.
Hi, yeah, and I'm responding to the general comment. I agree with it in principle.
Let me just back up for a second and give some process about, sorry, George, I probably should have shared this with everybody. So we're going to use Robert's rules in a very loose form. So that means before we start discussing this general comment, I need a motion to approve it or some other kind of motion, and I need a second. And once that occurs, then we can open it to discussion. So at the moment, I'm recognizing people, assuming that people have questions that are off of this comment specifically.
Okay.
Once we get through that, I'll entertain a motion about the comment specifically, and then we'll move forward.
Okay.
So again, this is sort of modified Robert's rules. So if you don't know Robert's rules, don't worry about it. I'm just sort of, I don't know it perfectly by any stretch. We're just sort of loosely using it to try to keep order with the way we're doing things here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I'll move this project for approval, or the comment for approval.
So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So the comment has been moved for approval. Is there discussion on the comment?
So then I also had discussion. Oh, someone lowered my hand.
I lowered your hand, but that's because you're talking.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I actually just wanted to respond to the idea of having a sub task force, and just do want to recognize that, yeah, in the first year, this is a lot of projects for sure. And that as you do go through them, especially on the transportation side, though, you will find that there's a lot of repetition. And so I like this general comment because we do need that time frame, especially if you're new, to have sufficient time to go through it. And that just kind of gives some comfort that it does get better, it does get easier, and that a lot of the comments are, at least on transportation, our comments for transportation projects are usually individual, and they're not on the 60 or 70 road projects. So I guess that's all to say. I don't know that there'd be a high value in having subtasks or sub-task forces.
Okay, so we have a queue. I'm going to recognize George, then Erica, then Jeff. George, you're up. George, you're muted.
It keeps remuting me, so sorry about that. My comment or concern about the comment, well, I should say I agree in principle with what the comment states, but my concern relates to the statement that the committee lacks sufficient time for the thoughtful deliberation, because I worry that well, if you didn't have sufficient time to think about it, should I value your input, right? And it may be better phrased to say that the value provided by the committee and the value of insights provided by the committee would increase if it had more time, as suggested in the next paragraph.
Erica, go ahead.
I think the content of this comment is important feedback for staff and probably not anything they don't know. I don't think it makes sense in the report, though.
Jeff, and then I'm going to recognize myself.
Okay. All right. I support the comment. I think it is good for the policymakers, the elected policymakers, the mayor, and the council members to see what their dedicated volunteers are facing in this. As I think one of our electeds may have commented about the heavy lifting involved with CLIC. I do have a couple of suggestions, friendly amendments, if you will, if we're operating in that mode. COVID-19, I'd like to see the, all caps COVID-19. And then I think the last second sentence in the first paragraph, it needs to say analyze more than 100 or something. It's not quite complete. And then I agree with George's suggestion about wordsmithing, which I think as long as we don't change the meaning, the substance, I think wordsmithing is something that typically happens around here. But I do support the comment. Thank you, Steve.
All right, I'm going to recognize myself. I 100% agree with Erica on this one. I don't disagree with any, I hate that term. I agree with everything that Steve says in this comment. It's all absolutely accurate. Although I will take issue with the last sentence of the last paragraph. I don't believe that we lack sufficient time. We lack sufficient time. The CBRs came to us too late. So we went into the presentation days not as prepared as we should have been. But the way the sentence is written, it could be interpreted as we lack sufficient time over the course of the whole process. So I think George's point there is important. And should this comment pass, which I hope it does not, that would be fixed. This has been a one-off year. We've never had this problem before. In every other year, we've gotten CBRs at the end of March, and we've had something close to a month to analyze it. It was this coming together of forces, COVID-19, all this turnover in staff that caused this year. If this were a repeated problem, then I would say, yep, you put a comment in the report to get people's attention. It's not a repeated problem. As Erica pointed out, staff is well aware of this. Staff has been, the new staff this year, I would say, has been as capable and as responsive, possibly more than any we've ever had in the 15 years I've been on this committee. And there's no reason not to believe that this won't be fixed for next year. I view this as an internal thing and something that just doesn't need to be aired in the public report at this point. And I think to the extent that people are concerned that it doesn't hold them accountable, I suspect we could get Amelia to commit to us that this will get addressed and the comment isn't necessary. So I'm voting no on this. Amelia, then Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, so I will say that the pushback to the beginning of the CBR, which is just what you noted, John Bernstein, was really a one-off thing. We didn't, I wasn't in my current position, and staff was still, the staff that need to complete the CBRs were struggling to meet it, so I moved the date back. And I think that for sure that won't happen next year. The concern, or just the piece of information that I want to put in your ears as you consider this, is the timing of finishing your work is really important because of the decision making that the mayor and then council does. Statutes dictate when the mayor needs to make his decision, and so delaying the total overall timeline will just put your information in a worse place to be considered by decision makers. And I wouldn't want you to approve something that adds weeks in the process that make it harder for you to come up with a calendar that that gets your product in front of decision makers at the right time. So that would just be what I would offer, thinking about the overall budget process. But I absolutely will commit to not scooting back that deadline next year. That's a doable thing for sure.
Go ahead, Jeff, then Amity.
Okay, I would move to table this in order to have the author and others look at it and see if it can't be tweaked to make something that is meaningful but not critical. Longtime members will acknowledge that the click process has been compressed and compressed. And I too will say that as a nearly 25-year member, I don't think we've ever had this many staff assisting click. So this is a first, but I would move to table it.
Is there a second?
Second, Zerka.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to table the comment. Can someone call the, Neil, can you call the roll?
Absolutely. Steve Brandt.
Talk about this and haven't been recognized.
I may have made a mistake. Jeff, can a motion to table be discussed, or is that just voted on?
I think it's non-debatable.
That's what I thought. It's not up for discussion when that's moved. Go ahead with the roll call.
Okay. Steve Brandt. Steve Brandt. Sonia DeGarmo.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Aye.
Risa Hustad.
Aye.
Inca.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Jeff Strand,
Aye.
Vice Chair Katie Jones,
Aye.
Chair John Bernstein,
Aye.
and that's 13 ayes.
All right, motion carries. Amity, sorry, you've been waiting very patiently.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute. I don't know that it really matters right now, but I think I agree with Erica and John on this one. I do also think that in terms of process, that there could be better work on like existing click members to actually be explicit with newer members about how much time we have actually put into this process. Like, does it take a full 2 weeks? Do we all, I mean, like me, spend 5 hours jamming all the information in before the full day sessions? I think there's some internal work that we as click members can do to help this process move.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. In the defense of some of us that have been in leadership, I would say that myself personally, and I know Jeff as well, have offered ourselves up with my personal phone number, emails, and I've never been taken up on it. So, I know people are busy. I don't say that as a criticism, but rather just, people are busy and this is time consuming. The last thing I would note on all of this is that, there's time constraints on both sides of this, right? I mean, so you're talking about a budget in a given year. Departments start on this stuff in January, if not before, and have till the end of March to get all of their different budget requests in order and submitted. So that's the upfront thing. And then you've got the mayor who's got to present a budget in August, right? So that's why this thing has always been sandwiched between the end of March and the end of June, this thing being the click process, between the end of March and the end of June. And I don't think there's any wiggle room there. I don't know how you can ask staff to do their part any faster than that. And as Amelia pointed out, there's statutory reasons why the mayor does what he does when he does it. So, but this year that got compressed even more, because of COVID, and we've already heard that won't be the case next year, that these CBRs get submitted at the end of March and we should have them shortly thereafter, and pretty much have the month of April before we start having to hear presentations from staff. All right, so I think we can move on from this one. Neil, can you scroll up a little bit so we can see the comment? We're going to consider Water 12. So I'll give everybody about a minute and a half or a minute to read Water 12 before we start discussing it.
I need somebody to read these comments.
All right, I'll go ahead and do that. That actually will be better because then I know that everybody's had a chance to hear it. All right, so we're going to consider Water 12. Eric, I am an old man. Can you zoom this up just a little bit? Perfect. So Water 12 reads, Click recommends that the water treatment and distribution services develop and implement on an expedited schedule a proactive plan to address the water quality issues of customers residing or doing business on streets with dead-end water mains. Priority should be given to relining these mains to address tuberculate corrosion that infiltrates the homes and businesses of customers when these mains are flushed, causing damage to appliances and discoloration of fixtures. I'm going to take a point of privilege here on this one. Steve, did you author this?
Oh, did John freeze up?
Can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Steve, did you author this comment? Steve Brandt?
Doesn't look like he's in the meeting anymore.
Oh, maybe he got that. I'm guessing Steve authored this. Just for background for people, there's a guy named Jim Hagan who is a Minneapolis city resident, lives over near the river, and lives on a street that has a dead-end water main. He, because of these public meetings this year, has been able to contact a number of us, myself included, and has very respectfully alerted us to this problem that he specifically has and that actually exists in a surprising number of places around the city. He's probably been working on this for something like 6 years, and is actually an incredibly patient guy about this. He has a big picture view of this, that this is a problem that's not just his own personal problem and his neighbors, but it's a problem in a bunch of places around the city. And he recognizes that his street might not be the first to have it fixed. And he'd be happy if he knew that the city had a plan to address this problem broadly, and at some point his street would get it fixed, even if that means it's a couple years from now. He's incredibly reasonable about this. That having been said, I was planning on writing a comment about this. Might have been a little bit different than this one. And I was waiting to do that because I had asked some pretty direct questions of the water department at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to give them a chance to respond before I authored a comment.
They have responded. That is in the SharePoint, FYI.
Okay, thank you. I haven't seen that yet. So I was hoping we could, I don't want to make the motion, but I was hoping we could table this one. Or if Steve is, well, I was going to just ask Steve if we could work on it together, but he's not here at the moment. So
he's back now.
Steve, are you here?
I'm here.
So did you hear what I said?
I think I heard only the second part. You wanted to work on this a little bit because you'd been involved as well, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, not so much that I've been involved, but that I had asked some specific questions of the water department, which I understand from Katie they've answered, and I didn't realize they'd done so. I want to take a look at those answers. So if it's amenable to you, could we unofficially, I don't even think we need to take a vote because since you're the author, if you're okay with it, could you and I work on this one and come back next week with it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay. I don't think we need to get a formal vote on that since the author of the comment is in agreement on that. So with that, we'll move, Steve and I will work on that and bring it back next week. With that, we'll move to PV 122, which is Dowling Avenue, and I'll read the comment. This reconstruction project is necessary for the significant redevelopment of the Upper Harbor Terminal site. However, city staff have failed to explain why this half-mile project cost $19.6 million when other reconstruction projects of comparable length, PV 150, 140, 160, cost as little as $6.9 million. There are likely good reasons for the cost differential, but Public Works needed to explain why this project will consume money that otherwise could be allocated to other projects that have been deferred due to tightening paving resources. So I'll entertain a motion on this. You don't need to raise your hand. All right, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Dan Miller.
All right, so the motion on the floor is to pass the comment for PV 122. I'll recognize Jeff. Did you take your hand down? There he is. Go ahead, Jeff. Jeff, did you want to be recognized?
No, I was just trying to move or second it.
Ah, gotcha. Is there any discussion? Any comments on this comment as written? I just have a wordsmithing thing. I think we could change Public Work needed to explain to Public Work needs to explain. Steve, are you the author of this?
Yes.
Are you okay with that change?
Yes.
Any further discussion on PV 122 as written? Hearing none, let's call the roll on this one, Neil.
All right.
So we're voting on passage of this comment as written.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
Sonia DeGarmo.
Aye.
Engel.
Aye.
Emily Foster.
Aye.
Goodmanstead.
Aye.
Lisa Hustad.
Aye.
Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Jeff Strand.
Aye.
Vice Chair Katie Jones.
Aye.
Chair John Bernstein.
Aye.
That's 14 ayes.
We're a very agreeable task force this morning. All right, Neil, could you scroll past these HD comments to the next transportation comments?
Is that where you want? PV001?
Yeah, go up for just a second. I don't think there was anything up there. I think everything up there is HD. Slow down. Yeah, that water 18 is an HD. PSD is an HD. Keep going down now. Yep. Okay. All right. So this is a longer comment. I'll read it. This is for PV001, which is the Parkway Paving Project. This is authored by Dan Miller. Thanks for claiming it as yours, Dan. That's helpful. Here we go. This program is greatly appreciated by Parkway users who have had to put up with badly degraded conditions, which are a safety hazard to users and their vehicles. While typically not replacing curbs and gutter, the paving program is often a significant roadway reconstruction, as is Theodore Wirth Parkway from Plymouth to 29th in 2020 to 2021, where the entire road base was replaced. Unfortunately, this new roadway encourages speeding and increases the barrier and invisibility of Minneapolis pedestrians trying to access the Grand Rounds trail system. This program does not include adding enhanced pedestrian crossings, nor does any other MPRB or Public Works program for parkways. For the Theodore Wirth Parkway Paving Program, 4 intersections, Plymouth, McNair, 26th, and 29th, should have pedestrian crossing signs and pavement markings to encourage access similar to what can be found south of 94-394 along the Grand Rounds and Chain of Lakes. There is a startling inequity which can be observed by driving the Grand Rounds and doing a city records review of enhanced pedestrian crossings. St. Anthony Parkway from University to Stinson is programmed for 2023 to 2024 and is likewise lacking any enhanced crossings. A holistic approach to encouraging pedestrian use and making drivers aware of pedestrians is to include crossing enhancements in the Parkway Paving Program. Go ahead, Katie. Is this a motion?
Yes, I move to approve, and then I'd like to comment.
Is there a second?
Second Strand.
Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I'm moving primarily to be able to discuss. I like what this comment is trying to bring up, and I'm wondering if it should honestly be a little bit broad. I mean, use this as an example, but a broader discussion point. Knowing that the city just developed the Transportation Action Plan, and that there are design guidelines. I think the question is, why aren't the design guidelines being used for parkways? That plan may have been passed after this upgrade was made, so that may be the answer. So actually maybe it's worth asking Public Works about that before making a comment, because there may be a clarification for the specific one, and to note whether or not those design guidelines with those pedestrian, like advanced pedestrian improvements, will be in projects going forward.
Go ahead, Steve.
I would like to suggest that we delete the comment about the South City of Lakes and, Chain of Lakes and the Grand Round. I just looked at Google Maps for several well-used crossings at Lake Harriet for pedestrians and cyclists and found no pavement markings. There might be a pedestrian crossing sign, but that's it. I think that those of us on the south side do have a couple of good crossings, the one on southeast Harriet and the one at northeast Bede-Makaska, but I don't think it's generally true that we have the kind of enhanced pedestrian crossings that Dan is hoping for here.
Yeah, I'm going to dovetail off of what Steve just said and recognize myself here. I agree with the general message that Dan, or the request that Dan is placing here, but I think both Katie and Steve's observations are good ones. And broadly speaking, about the tone of the comment, I feel like you could address this without, I mean, I wouldn't go, there's nothing in here that's inflammatory, but it's just worded in a way that I don't know that I would say that there's inequities. I mean, I think it's as simple as what Katie just said, is that they've got this, to me, we could tie this into the zero vision. We just need to alert them to the fact or raise the point, why aren't you addressing pedestrian stuff when you're doing this? You should be. And it's as simple as that. And they should be doing that all over the city. Even if Katie's right that the Theodore Wirth Park project was before that, if what Dan says here is accurate, there's a project in the future that does not contemplate that at St. Anthony Parkway. So the issue still is an issue that I think needs to be addressed, but I'll recognize George and then Dan.
Yeah, hi. Along the same lines, as I read this, it seems like the onus shouldn't be on click members or other neighborhoods constituents to evaluate on an intersection by intersection basis. I think it'd be helpful to understand, what are the criteria that the city uses to determine whether to have these enhancements, and then apply them consistently, right? Because we shouldn't be having to say at Lake Harriet we use one methodology, at Worth Park we use a different one, or try to enforce that methodology. So if they could just articulate the criteria, and then we can hold them accountable to comply with it going forward. That'd be my recommendation on how to incorporate this concern, because I fundamentally agree with the concern, but just want it to be applied consistently.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of you folks in the rational thoughts about try to approach this, other than to say I have. And what I have gotten is mixed messages continuously, and done a lot of research on this. I have done a significant amount of research driving this, riding it, observing it, and let me tell you, it's a huge inequity. It's a huge inequity south of 394 compared to north of 394. All you got to do is drive it and think about it. And quite frankly, I mean, if you're going to make a comment to these folks, and it would be to our traffic department, is if they actually have a record of, how many pavement markings do you have out there? How many signs do you have out there? And you'd be just surprised. It's scary. It's scary to the difference. I mean, somehow there's things that got done down south, whether you notice it or not, as an individual, and think about it compared to actually physically looking at those locations, you'll just be blown away. And so that's why I mention it. It's I've done my research on this one. What I'm trying to shoot for is go look in the records and look at the count. And you're going to give me a number of reasons why this is put here and why this isn't there. The point is there's a stark inequity, and either just remove everything and be done with it because it's a budget issue, or be able to address some of those inequities that exist in North and Northeast Minneapolis.
I'm going to make a suggestion here, and then I'll recognize Steve and then Katie. I don't know whether there are inequities or not. I don't. That's the best way to approach this, because to me, we're talking about the grand rounds, and clearly they should be addressing the grand rounds the same way all the way around. They may come back and say, well, the reason that the area around the chain of lakes got more of it is because the counts are higher there. But that's not, to me, that's not relevant, right? I mean, it's all the grand rounds, and it should be treated the same way. So my proposal would be this. If Katie's amenable, maybe she could work with Dan, and maybe let's go back to Public Works and ask them a couple of pointed questions, and then draft the comment based on the answers we get from them. And I think that will strengthen the comment, instead of putting a comment out like this and they can just sort of come back and give some kind of one-off answer. Let's get those answers first so we can address that in the comment and just say, you need to address this. All right, having done that, I will recognize, or suggested that I'll recognize Steve, then Katie, then Erica.
I think John's suggestion is a good one, and I do not disagree with Dan's knowledge of the parkway system. It's second to none. But I think volume is one reason that certain places get priority. I don't think anybody can dispute that the northeast corner of Bede-Makaska gets more pedestrian use than the 26th and 29th crossings on Worth Parkway, both of which I have used several times this past summer. I think beyond volume, it's also a matter of timing. I mean, these projects involving regional parks come up on a cycle through the Metro process, Metro Parks and Open Space funding. And, Bede-Makaska and Harriet just got done a couple of years ago. Frankly, I would have spent the money fixing the existing trails before I added the bells and whistles, but they got the bells and whistles, presumably because they had a recently completed master plan that called for pedestrian improvements. And we should also maybe be aware of whether there's a master plan for the Grand Rounds and what it says for the areas that Dan is concerned about, and look at maybe whether that master plan needs to be updated. But I agree the general approach of let's have standardization all throughout the system is a good one. I just think sometimes timing plays into it.
Go ahead, Katie, then Erica.
Yeah, I think it's a good plan. Dan, I'd love to work with you more on this. And I think there's a way to talk about both standardization as well as addressing the specific concerns around pedestrian crossings here, and that we might even suggest that be addressed, like since the parkway has already been addressed, that then we suggest that these particular crossings be addressed with a different project or program through like the PK projects.
Go ahead, Erica.
Just so everyone in the group is hearing from everyone in the group, I just want to affirm I'm inclined to trust Dan's research here, and I think we have enough knowledge to ask some very specific questions of Public Works. So I just want to affirm I'm supportive of the plan for proceeding that John laid out.
So Dan, it's your comment, so it's kind of point of privilege to you if we're going to do this without any votes. Is that plan that I suggested that Katie would work on with you amenable to you?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I don't think this one requires a vote. We'll just come back. We've got 2 weeks on this, so I think the first thing is to work with staff to get some pointed questions answered by Public Works as quickly as possible. And if they don't come back and answer them, that can be part of the comment. We asked you and you weren't responsive. All right, with that, let's go ahead, Dan.
And staff, if staff is approaching them, go ahead and use the language in this thing, because that's how I'm feeling. And if it's appropriate, maybe that's enough to take them up a little. Thanks.
I would suggest that, Dan, you work with Katie and come up with some pointed questions to them and not just sort of throw the comment at them.
Yep, we can do that.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
I'll just tell you that I've made those pointed questions in more than one occasion to both Minneapolis staff and Park Works staff, and it's been a lot of finger pointing, and it all points back to the Parkway paving project. That's all the money we got. We don't want to give the parkways any more money, and the park board says the city takes care of it. So I've heard that as a citizen enough to be somewhat, I've spent some time writing this. I've spent a lot of time thinking and trying to do something about it. And I don't know how much more eloquent. I'll be looking at Katie to help me with this, and I'm willing to let this go, but I'm pessimistic as to say it any better. Thanks.
So just to be clear, Dan, I hope you're not feeling like anybody's trying to sweep this comment under the rug. I think that you have broad support for the comment, and we're actually just trying to find ways to strengthen it.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. I too want to just say thank you to Dan, and I want to express support for Dan and his comment. And if there are inequities, I think we need to call them out. I don't think we need to soften it, but I look forward to looking at this next week or the week after.
Yeah, to be clear on my comment about the inequities, I meant that in a strategic sense. If they can come back and say, well, we do this based on counts, it just, I think it's best to come at this the strongest way possible. And there could be an easy out for them on that one, was all my point was. Jeff, do you want to be recognized again, or did I just forget to take your hand down?
Good to go.
Okay, Neil, can you scroll up to PV 127, please? So here, just go back to the title. Let me read that, and then I'll read this one. This is PV 127. That's 37th Avenue Northeast from Central Avenue to Stinson Boulevard. This is another one drafted by Dan. Neil, can you scroll up just a little bit more so I can see the whole text? Perfect. This combined Minneapolis and Columbia Heights project is an opportunity to bridge these communities and expand user options. This is part of the Minneapolis All Ages and Abilities Network extending from Main Street Northeast to Stinson Boulevard. Unfortunately, the 2018 Main Street to University asphalt resurfacing did not include bike facility striping. The 2019 to 2020 University to Central asphalt resurfacing was done in combination with the Columbia Heights multi-use path. Unfortunately, this path is substandard in width, pavement markings, wayfinding, and lighting. PV 127 is an opportunity to do more than the minimum, I assume you mean 137, is an opportunity to do more than the minimum which appears to be what is being planned. The Regional Solicitation Grant has a $500,000 line item for pedestrian lighting, which both Minneapolis and Columbia Heights planners do not wish to address. Minneapolis needs to be more involved with this project and not let a Columbia Heights contract designer propose solutions which are outdated before construction begins. Do I have a motion?
So move it forward.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on this one? Go ahead, Dan. Dan, then Jeff.
Yeah, again, I am putting these out in drafts. They all need a little bit of wordsmithing and kind of cleaning up. But again, this is a project that is frustrating to see how it's kind of getting fast-tracked without the standard engagement that goes on in Minneapolis projects, and what is being proposed was outdated to begin with, and I'm just astounded that Minneapolis is going along with it.
Thanks, Chair. My point is just what the author said, that maybe in a wordsmithing sense, not repeating unfortunately, and putting in a comma or here or there would be make that impactful. So I think that is assumed by the task force when these are finished and approved.
So if I'm hearing any further comments on this one? Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, so this is, and maybe this is worth a comment that's separate, but like I hear what you're saying on this, and I have actually a similar concern about another street project that is, supposed to have, like, given the transportation action plan, it's supposed to have a bike facility. It's not planned, and so to me, it's part of these projects are that the city isn't following its own policy, and it's not advocating for its own policy. So, yeah. I'm definitely in favor of this comment, and thinking if there may be a bigger one that goes along with it.
I'm going to recognize myself for a second. Yeah, I would piggyback on what Katie just said. I don't know any of the specifics like Dan clearly does on this. I have and I'd like to see some of this fleshed out, especially the sentence about the regional solicitation grant and this thing that they're not addressing with pedestrian lighting. I have a little bit of concern with the last sentence, just because that's, to a certain extent, getting, I think we need to be careful about how we say that last thing. And I'm not somebody who's one to, to mince words. If stuff is accurate, I'm fine with being quite direct, but the way that's worded, it's a bit argumentative, I think. And to Katie's point, maybe we need to just have a broader comment that says, listen, you got a plan, you're not following it, and we can list all, it doesn't have to be a general comment, it can be, listed for all of the projects that it applies to. So I'd like to see some wordsmithing to this one before it's passed, but I need somebody to volunteer to help Dan with that if that's going to go forward. Are there further comments on this one?
Yeah, John, I would just piggyback and say that I do agree with what you were saying there about some wordsmithing, and Dan, if you're amenable, I'd be happy to work with you on that, because I definitely appreciate the sentiment that's in here.
That's fine by me. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll lump this one in with the previous comment and wait for you guys to come back to us on both of them. And I'd just like to say thank you to Dan. I mean, clearly you've done quite a bit of work on some of these comments from a research perspective. All right, so we'll move to PV 178, also drafted by Dan. This is Johnson Street Northeast at I-35W. In 2017, Minneapolis participation in Vision Zero was announced at the intersection of 18th and Johnson Street Northeast. PV 178 is the final step in addressing this dangerous 18,000, what is AADT?
Average annual daily traffic.
Thank you. Average annual daily traffic intersection. Since 2017, 18th Avenue has been reconstructed, and PV 156, Johnson Street, 18th to Lowry, will happen in 2021. This will all bring profound improvements on this important street and intersection. Thank you. Their motion. Steve.
I would move the comment. I would also propose an addition, but I'll let this be seconded first.
There's a second to the motion.
Second.
Okay. Steve, I'll recognize you again.
Okay. My proposal is to add this language at the end. CLIC encourages Public Works to work with Hennepin County to develop similar appropriate Vision Zero improvements for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists at the other end of this segment of 18th Avenue, where two city streets, a county highway, and a regional recreational trail all intersect at conflicting angles. I think that what this tries to do is say, yes, you took care of one end of this segment of 18th, but there's another high traffic end that's as or more complicated at the other end of this segment of 18th, and it needs some attention.
Dan, is that amendment amenable to you? Do you consider that friendly?
I consider that friendly, and Steve, if you could just, if this passes, you could send me that information. I'll get this worked up. Yeah.
Great.
Is there any further discussion on this one as proposed by Steve? What I'm going to suggest, if Steve's willing, is to read the entire comment with what you can see on the screen in addition to what Steve added, and we'll actually vote on it if that's amenable to everybody. Any further discussion before we do that? Steve, could you do that?
Read it again.
Yeah, start with what's on the screen and then continue with what you've got, so it reads as continue, and then we'll vote on it.
Great. In 2017, Minneapolis participation in Vision Zero was announced at the intersection of 18th and Johnson Street Northeast. PV 178 is the final step in addressing this dangerous 18,000 AADT intersection. Since 2017, 18th Avenue has been reconstructed, and PV 156 Johnson Street 18th to Lowry will happen in 2021. This all will bring profound improvements on this important street and intersection. Thank you. CLIC encourages Public Works to work with Hennepin County to develop similar appropriate Vision Zero improvements for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists at the other end of this segment of 18th Avenue, where two city streets, a county highway, and a regional recreational trail all intersect at conflicting angles.
So that's the motion on the floor, is to pass that comment as just read by Steve. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Matt, go ahead.
I like the addition there on the end, but I guess maybe me not being as familiar with the area, I don't know what is meant by the other end of 18th, and I don't know if that'll be entirely clear. We may want to name a specific intersection or a specific point of what the other end is, if we're going to include that.
Go ahead, Steve.
Good comment, Matt. I can do that. Should I do that before next week or just?
I think we can take that as a wordsmith. I mean, to me, that's a parenthetical. I think it's a good comment too, and it can be done parenthetically right after you say it at the other end of 18.
Right.
Give an intersection in parentheses.
Right.
Any further comments before we vote? Okay, Neil, can we call the roll on this one? This is to pass TV 178 as read by Steve.
All right, Steve Brandt.
Aye.
Sonia DeGarmo.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Kai Goodmanstead.
Aye.
Risa Hustad. Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Jeff Strand.
Aye.
Vice Chair Katie Jones.
Aye.
Chair John Bernstein.
Aye.
With that, we have 13 ayes.
The motion passes. Great. All right, moving along. Can you scroll up just a bit, Neil? So this is for, do you mind muting again? There we go. This is for BP 006, which is 18th Avenue Northeast Trail Gap from Marshall to California. Again, this one's drafted by Dan. This trail gap will connect the East Bank Trail along the river to the 18th Avenue Trail, creating a contiguous multi-use trail from the river to Washington Street. It is an important all ages and abilities route, particularly for the Sheridan, Bottineau, Holland, and Logan Park neighborhoods, and the planned 2021 construction is highly anticipated. The 18th Avenue Trail Route has been constructed in segments over time in 1997, 2012, and 2018, and has sometimes been referred to as the Trail to Nowhere due to several street detours. Upon the completion of BP 006, there is one remaining detour between Washington and Monroe Streets. This route runs from 2 blocks along the south side of the old East Side Maintenance Garage, which is being decommissioned. We ask that the 2022 to 2028 capital budget requests include this last remaining gap, 18th Avenue Trail Gap, Washington to Monroe, which will expand a contiguous multi-use trail connecting the river to the diagonal trail. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second.
All right, the motion is to pass BP 006 as written, and I'll recognize Jeff.
Good point. I support the comment.
Any further discussion on this comment? Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we'll call a roll on this one.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
Sonia DeGarmo.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Kai Goodmanstead,
Aye.
Risa Hustad, Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Erica Mauter,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Todd Schumann,
Aye.
Jeff Strand,
Aye.
Vice Chair Katie Jones,
Aye.
Chair John Bernstein.
Aye,
That is 13 ayes.
and that motion passes. Okay, so the next comment is on Fleet 001, which is the fueling and charging stations. And Jeff, maybe you can help me out here. I believe that is an HD project. Can you confirm that for me, Jeff?
I believe that is what we agreed to.
Right. So that one will be considered by HD. Katie, I'll be talking to Eric, so I'll make sure if that's not already in their folder, I'll make sure that they're aware of that. That's one for them. Just in case anybody's wondering and going, well, wait, fleet sounds like transportation. The executive committee made the decision at the beginning of the year to give all the fleet projects to HD. It's a little bit, you could argue it either way, because these are facilities that clearly surround transportation, but they are facilities. So in that sense, those tend to be things that go to HD. An example of that would be Water 18. We do all of the water projects with the exception of 18, which is actually a building that, you know, is for the water department. So so that, along with the fact that we have far more projects than HD, was the reasoning why these went to them. All right, so with that, it looks like there's one more general comment for us to consider. Can you scroll up, Neil? Oh, this is what we were talking about, right? So we'll this will come back next week. So that gets us through all of the comments for today. I want to open it up again to ask for questions and comments from people. So I've got Katie and then Steve in queue. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, thanks. I am just wanting to let everyone know that I'm planning to write a comment regarding Nearside signals. So we had someone come to our meeting, our public meeting about that, and that there are potential pedestrian improvements that could be found with piloting Nearside intersection signals.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Steve, go ahead, and then Jeff.
I just wanted John to advise the group that when my general comment, proposed general comment that led off the meeting was being discussed, I thought I was in the meeting, but it turned out I had not gotten out of the incorrect link I was in before, and I could hear you, but you couldn't hear me. So that's why I didn't offer any counter arguments, and I will save them for next week, as my understanding is the matter is tabled, and so I'll just save my counter arguments. But I would like to offer some other perspectives for people to consider next time we discuss comments about that particular comment. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in here for a second. Jeff, I might solicit a comment from you on this. Given that we had a technology issue with that, I don't want to reopen this to a vote, but I would take privilege to allow Steve to make those comments now so people have time to think about that, since, he should have had that chance earlier on. Do you think that's reasonable, Jeff?
I think that's entirely reasonable. And actually, I'll just through the chair say to colleague Steve Brandt that I tabled it in order to preserve and protect it for later action. And I hope that the member understood that.
So let's just hold the queue. Everybody stay where you are. And Steve, I'll recognize you to comment on that, since we had a technology issue around that earlier.
Actually, John, I think I'll defer till the next meeting, simply because I'd like to do some more research on some of the points that were raised now that I have the chance. And I appreciate, Jeff, your preservation of this future discussion. Thank you. Okay,
so we'll keep moving. So I'll recognize Jeff and then Erica. Thank
you. And I just want to say that when the people work on the dead end water mains, that I hope the authors in rewriting it will acknowledge the Mr. Hagan coming through the public input session, because I will explain that once again, CLIC is not getting extreme support from neighborhood and community engagement. They are kind of putting back saying it's the staff who support the committee who have to do this. And so we're operating in a somewhat challenging virtual environment, both for the public and for members. And I think the staff support is doing an exemplary job, but it is challenging for the public. And once again, as one of our members pointed out about the sidewalk apps, that actually did come through CLIC and it made some change. My other point that I just want to mention is I do look forward to having some comment about the, I think it's Water 18 and the Hiawatha campus, that in observing an update from one of the council members, I believe from Ward 8, and I have to research this further about a council action that may have put a footnote for staff direction as to those projects, and it really has implications for the entire city. Thank you.
So I'll just jump in on that for a second, just to recognize that there is a comment on Water 18, I believe, authored by Steve, but we skipped over that because that's an HD project. Erica, and then Steve.
I just want to express appreciation for Dan and the research he put into his comments, and also appreciate his being direct and slightly spicy as appropriate.
Steve, go ahead, then Scott.
Just as long as we're winding up a little bit early here, I just wanted to mention that for those of you who are on Twitter, I put in a couple tweets today publicizing the public input meeting on Thursday and urging the public to get involved with a link to how to do that and to the CBRs. And I used the Northside Greenway as an example of a citizen-initiated project that got into the capital program. And I will probably amend my tweet to add the sidewalk gaps and the potential comment about relining of water mains as examples of where the public can make a difference.
Thank you. Scott.
Yeah, so I've had technical problems getting into this meeting, so I'm not clear. At a previous transportation committee, someone, and I don't remember her name, mentioned she was going to write a comment about sidewalk gaps. Has that been done? And
hey, Scott, that was me, Amity, and I just haven't done it. I'm going to reach out to you to help me.
Yeah, that's what I was offering to do, was to maybe connect on it.
Yes, I will email you today.
Okay. So, and then the other piece was, I was in a meeting with Council President Bender yesterday, and she was talking about Nicollet Avenue and the Kmart site. And it just hit me that it seems so odd that we are using CLIC or going through this CLIC process and there's no bridge or road construction project, a CBR for that. So I don't know. This is my only second year on the CLIC, so maybe I'm looking to the folks that have been on CLIC previously, but is that a type of a comment that would make sense to add? It just seems so weird to me that.
I'm going to jump in on that one. I would say before you even get to a comment, I would encourage you to work through staff and send a pointed question to Public Works asking why we haven't seen it. There might be an explanation that's reasonable and there might not be, but I would start with that, because if there is a reasonable explanation or an explanation that's half reasonable, it'll make the comment more powerful if you have that information first. Steve, go ahead.
Would Nicollet and Lake be excluded from quick consideration because it's a redevelopment project?
So we wouldn't see economic development stuff, but to Scott's point, there ought to be some kind of infrastructure improvement going on around there that would be that we would see.
And that's what Council President Bender talked about. It is a transportation project, and they do have funding through this value capture. So, and it's related to sort of the streetcar at this point, but it's, you know, you'd have to fix the bridge to get the streetcar over, and the city is working with the legislature to try to broaden that to transit generally, but still, it is a transportation project.
Ironically, I will tell you that for many, many years on this committee, there was a project that they would put in every year that was kind of a placeholder. Not kind of, it was a placeholder, and it was always in what then would have been the out year of the plan, which was the 5th year. And it was always around the idea that the city wanted to reacquire that property, but at the time had nothing even in the works at that point. And it always got rated terribly, not because we didn't like the idea, but because they were asking to stick money there as a placeholder for a project that was nowhere near. They didn't even have the land to start considering the project. The joke used to be, you know, attention Kmart shoppers, look twice before crossing aisle 5, right? I mean, go ahead, Steve.
I would just suggest, you know, far be it from me to try and not expand the role of CLIC in projects like these, but it's entirely possible that the city is planning to finance some of these improvements through tax increment financing, or the streetcar project, which is like tax increment financing. And we typically don't review those sorts of projects.
So just to clarify, Council President Bender felt like there should have been a CLIC project because she considered it a transportation project, and that there would be also a redevelopment thing that CPED would work on, but there should be a public works project. So that's what I was told by the council president.
So I would make 2 points. One, I would reiterate what I said. I would strongly encourage you to ask the question through staff directly to Public Works with a request that you get an answer in 7 days or less, so that we can act as a task force if we want to. Also, I'm wondering if you asked Council President Bender if she was following up with Public Works herself. Seems like she ought to be, or her staff ought to be.
She said she's been working on it, but she's going to leave office soon, and she was talking about it as an issue coming up into the future for a future council person. So, but yes, I hear you that she is the council president. So,
all right. So moving forward, Steve, did you want to be recognized, or did I just forgot to take your hand down?
No.
Okay. Anything else at this point? I've got Dan, but just a second. Any concerns of any sort before we adjourn here? I'll recognize Dan and then Jeff.
Yeah, this is a point of inquiry to you, I think, John, and to Katie, is that there's a couple of things that I propose that we need to work on with Katie. So we should get together afterwards and figure out those next steps. And the piece about asking the question to the Public Works regarding these, are those made to our staff, and does staff then present them to Public Works? And what type of, how fast do we need to turn this stuff around? That's.
So yeah, I would encourage you to work directly with Katie on this via email or however you guys would like to, or up to me. I might meet at a brew pub outside somewhere, but that's just me. And then beyond that, I think the best way to proceed with this is to, I think the most effective way to get answers would be to go through staff and make a point of saying that this is time sensitive, that we're drafting comments around these issues, and that you have a deadline of next Tuesday to get the comment drafted, not to hear from them, so that they are well aware that we're on a time constraint here, so that if they don't respond, we can get pointed in the answer in the comment, knowing that we made it clear to them that this was time sensitive.
And staff member, who would that be? Justin?
You can email Justin, myself, or Robert, and then also, so there is a shared like Google Doc on the SharePoint site that you can put those questions into. But I think either of these two routes would be good for getting that question submitted to Public Works.
That's Justin, and who are you? Let's see.
Neil.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
And who else?
Robert Harrison.
Okay, good. All right, very good. Thank you.
On process on that, I think it's fine if people want to put something in SharePoint, but I would also email directly. The idea with SharePoint is so questions don't get repeated. These questions are so pointed, and they're for our and they're task force specific, and we're all on this call, so I don't think there's much of a concern that somebody else is going to separately ask these same questions. All right, I'll go to Jeff and then Matt.
My only last question is just to confirm through the chair that I will certainly try to use SharePoint. Like, I had access problems this week, and so will the chair be able to provide us an email of newly incoming draft comments before the May 12th meeting? And then did we get a secretary pro tem appointed while I was trying to log on?
You didn't hear the good news, Jeff. It's you. I'm kidding. Yeah, thank you for that. So here's what I propose to do going forward. I don't want to discourage anybody from using SharePoint. If you want to put stuff in SharePoint, that's fine. You can do that. I find it to be clunky at best. So here's what I would propose. I will operate as secretary this year. If you have a comment that you would like considered at our next meeting, email it to me, and I will put them all together and email them to our task force, hopefully the day before our meeting or the morning of, but ideally the day before, so late on Tuesday, so people have a chance to hopefully read them before we convene next Wednesday. Does that sound reasonable? I'll take silence as yes, and I'm going to recognize Matt.
Thank you. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I need to play catch up, both as a first-time member trying to work my way through this, and also had some things outside of my control that meant I missed last Friday's meeting and some other things. I just wanted to ask, we don't need to do this now, but I would love to get sort of an overview of really what should I be focusing on? When are my deadlines? I'm just a bit confused about all of it. Could I reach out to either staff or to you, John, or to anyone else to have a quick conversation or email about that? And who should I direct those to if I just need kind of a reorientation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think this is a good time to address that. I'm going to just grab my schedule here so I can answer part of that. So the primary focus right now for everybody should be the comments, drafting comments. And this goes back to what Sonia suggested at the beginning of the meeting, that, that's something, it's kind of late to make any changes for this year, but as I mentioned, we're always open to considering anything. But here, just as a way to kind of try to help you with this, here's what I would suggest as a first-year member. With respect to comments, think back on projects that you heard about or that you read about that strike a chord with you, whatever it is. Whether it's a theme that you're concerned about. I mean, Dan clearly has a theme. That's fine. That's great. He's passionate about that, and it's reflected in those comments and the work that he put into them. So I would let something like that guide you on comments where you're like, you know what, this just does not make sense to me. Why are they doing this way? Instead of trying to go through every single comment and figure out whether, just pick the things that you're passionate about and let that guide you on comments for now. So for the next 2 weeks now, for our meeting on the 12th and our meeting on the 19th, that's the focus. HD is a little bit behind us. They're finishing up those categorizations of the point ranges for HD projects today. Once they do that, I anticipate that sometime in the next few days, you will get a rating sheet, an Excel rating sheet that has all of those ranges pre-filled out on it, so you know what those ranges are. Again, you're allowed to go outside of the range, but you're encouraged to stay in them unless you really feel passionate about a particular project and want to rate outside of that. So that's the other thing that you kind of need to start on in parallel, and that requires, considering each and every project. And I would say there, as you go through these CBRs, you'll find that, they're all structured the same way, and, whatever page it is, they're all about 5 pages, and page 3, is generally, I'm making this up, but it's the same idea, is the gobbledygook where they tell you how it fits every city, city goal. And it's amazing how every project seems to fit every city goal, right? So that information is not particularly useful. And by reading the project purpose up front, you can make your own assessment of that pretty easily. You also have the guidance of each of the task forces based on the range that we've given. So I think an easier way to focus on this is to sort of step back and take a broader picture at this. Rate a couple of projects in each area that make sense to you, that you sort of get the hang of what's going on with it, and then start to use that framework that you've created for yourself and try to apply that consistently across all of the projects as you start rating them. And use it as a relative thing, especially when you get down to the qualitative section. And I wouldn't get too worried about whether on a 15-point scale something is a 7 or an 8, right? Maybe you move it in 2-point increments or 3-point increments or 5-point increments. It's not that precise, right? So don't make this harder than it needs to be. Some of it is just going to be your own personal assessment about how much a particular project contributes to neighborhood livability or not. And whether that's a 5 or a 10 or 15 might be easier than trying to worry about a 15-point scale, literally point by point. That's kind of how I approach things. I'm sure others could give you a different way. I don't think it matters too much what your specific approach is, other than trying to come up with something that you can apply consistently across all of the projects that you rate. So, and that's the next deadline will be on draft comment, or those ratings will be due May 20th. No, sorry. Yes, May 20th. So we have the same deadline for both our individual ratings and draft comments, which is May 20th. So hopefully that helps a bit. Steve, I'll recognize you.
I had a question and then something to follow up on what John just said. I wondered if staff has an estimate on when we will get those spreadsheets with the city goal decisions we made and the level of need decisions that we made, number one. And then secondly, I found as a new member, and still I do spend most of my time on the specific qualitative criteria. I find that filling in the number of points for level of need and the number of points for contribution of city goals goes much faster.
Neil, I don't know if you have an answer. You may or may not have an answer on when we'll get the rating sheets.
I think I mean the rating sheets are dependent on when the other task force is done with their rating. So I don't know where they're at with that today. But it won't take. I don't think it'll take too long to put that together and send out to members. So, but I guess that's just a question mark at this moment.
Anything else before we adjourn? Okay. So
script, John.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Before we get to that, I just want to reiterate that if anybody has additional concerns or wants some help or guidance, if you reach out to me via email or phone, I'm more than happy to try to help. Don't be shy about that. And I'm confident I can speak for Jeff in the same way, and there's probably others as well who would be more than happy to help. Neil, can you put the script up? Oh, yeah, perfect. Well, actually, I have it, don't I? I will ask members and staff if there are any other matters to come before this meeting. If not, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, May 12th at noon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Neil, I think you can turn off the recording.